In statistics, there are three ways to identify trends. The first way to identify a trend is the previous example by looking at a scatter diagram. Okay. By looking at the scatter diagram, okay, we can maybe tell a little bit whether or not the pattern or the behavior tends towards the positive or the negative type of trend. But that's one way to identify is a scatter diagram. But the scatterness that weakens the strength of a scatter diagram. So what we can also look at is the strength of the linear trend. The strength of the linear trend is called the linear correlation coefficient. And the linear correlation coefficient, we denote it as R. Okay? And there's a formula to measure the strength of the trend, okay? But in this class, I'm going to show you a calculator way to calculate this R. So before we look at the example on how to calculate the R for this graph, okay, we just want to look at a few properties first. So when it comes to different strengths of trends, say for example we have positive trends going down this way. Okay. Suppose one of the positive trends looks like this. Suppose we have another positive trend that maybe looks like this. Okay. And then maybe we have another one that looks like this. Okay. So if you notice the first one, it's all about identifying a trend. If the line or if the data points form a straight line, like so, then this is called perfect. Okay. That's called perfect. But the more that that it becomes scattered, like these two examples, the weaker it becomes. First of all, if you're perfect, we give the perfect linear relation in the positive direction a perfect 1. So R equals 1 in that example. If we're trying to give the following an R value, well, they're more scattered. They're not perfect. So the further they move away, the weaker the association. But notice these are still pretty close together in the second example right here. So it's still pretty strong. We can call this one a strong positive relation, where this here we're just going to give this a value. This can be something like 0.89, for example. It's not perfect, so it's not a 1, but it's pretty close to being perfect. With this example, it's a lot weaker. They're more scattered, so this becomes weaker. We can call this one moderate. Okay, and for the moderate, we can maybe call this like 0.63 or so. Okay, but the weaker it becomes, the more scattered behavior we would expect. We can also look at the same thing with the negative, okay, with the negative trend. So say for example we have back to back perfect straight line in the negative trend direction. This we can give a value of something like R equals -1. Okay, so if it's perfect straight line, it's considered perfect. Positive trend, give it a +1. Negative trend, give it a -1. Similarly, if you have trends a little bit more scattered but in the negative direction, this is still pretty close, not too scattered. So you can maybe give this something like an R equals -0.91, for example. And again, these numbers here, I'm going to show you how to actually calculate them in the calculator here in a bit. And if we look at the last one here, we can also have a lot more scattered, but we can still tell the trend is in the negative direction. But because it's a lot more scattered, we give this maybe something like a -0.51. But the idea is the closer to 1 it is, the less scattered the points are. The further away from 1, the more scattered they are. Now, this one's a tricky one, but suppose that we have something like this. Okay. And in the previous video, we said that this is considered no trend. Now, when we think of no trend and we're trying to assign a strength, a number to it, we would think r equals 0 would be the only thing we can assign to it. But I do want to show you that if it's close to 0 in either direction, then we say there's little to no evidence of a linear relation. So it doesn't just have to be 0, it can also be something like negative 0.001 or r equals to 0.03, for example, something that's very, very close to 0. It doesn't have to be exactly 0, but if it's very close, we consider that no trend. Okay. So what we want to do in this example, when we look at our previous one, okay, I want to give this an R number, a strength, okay, a strength. So if you notice, now that we've looked at some different examples, this is not a straight line with the data points. So we shouldn't expect this to be a perfect +1. It is in the positive direction though, so we should expect our R number to be a positive number. And let me show you how to calculate that, okay? First thing, let's go back to the home screen, okay? And then in order to calculate without having to use the formula can be very difficult to use. The calculator, there's a setting that's turned off by default, and we must turn it on, okay? And what that's called, let me show you, okay? We're gonna look for something called diagnostic on. Okay, so the way you do that, you go into the calculator and you hit second and 0, and this goes for the 83 and the 84, okay, either one. And what you'll do, the second 0 pulls up the catalog or every single command and function that the calculator has. It's in alphabetical order, so you can scroll if you want to. Let's try that one more time. Second 0. You can scroll all the way down until you get to diagnostic on. You can also hit the alpha button, and then you can hit this button here. It'll take you there a little bit quicker if you want to do it that way as well. But look for diagnostic on, okay? Now, when you get there, hit enter, and then hit enter one more time, okay? So when you hit enter one more time, then the setting is turned on in order for the calculator to give us what the R value will equal to, okay? So that's the first step, okay? The second step, there's a new calculator function that we will be using in this class. So if you recall, we've been using statplot, we've been using one-bar stat, if you recall, for mean, median, or quartiles. There's a new calculator function now. The one we're going to look for is called linreg. Okay, linreg. So 83 and 84 will be very similar. What you'll do is you'll first make sure that your data set is in the calculator. So stat edit, okay, be sure that you have your data in the calculator. And then once you do, second mode, always second mode just to be safe. And then you're gonna go back to stat and then go to calc, okay? This time we'll be passing the one-bar stat. And if you notice number four is the linreg, okay? If you have the 84, this is what your screen looks like. I'll show you what the other screen looks like for the 83 in a bit. But if you have the 84, your X list will be your L1, Y list will be L2, and for now, everything else leave by default, and you will calculate, okay? If the setting was turned off, you would only see the first 3 lines in the calculator, okay? But once you turn diagnostic on, what will happen is it'll put additional information for us. And for this class, we'll be using the last number right here, just the last one. Okay, and if you notice, it gives us an R number, which is positive, which we expected. We did not expect a perfect positive one, but it gave us a very strong strength in the positive direction. Okay, so R is equal to about 0.799 or so. Okay. And if as long as you don't reset your calculator, then diagnostic on will remain on. Okay. If you borrowed a calculator, for example, then it would be best to turn the diagnostic on every time. But if you do reset the calculator, by default, it does turn the setting off. So you'll have to turn the diagnostic on again. Okay. Now, for those of you who have the TI-83, let me show you what you do with yours. Okay. So with the TI-83, you'd first have to make sure that your data is in the calculator. So you'd still go to Stats, Edit, and then check your L1 and L2. Okay. Here, let's assume that I have my data in the calculator, and then we'll second mode. And once you're ready to calculate the linear correlation coefficient, that R number, the strength of the trend, you'll go to Stats, Calc, and then still number 4. Okay. The difference is it doesn't really tell us what to do from here, right? So right now, I'm assuming my data is in the calculator, and I'm assuming my diagnostic is on, okay? For those of you who have the TI-83, you have to do second 1 on the keypad. That's going to produce your X list on the home screen. Hit comma, and then second, and then 2. That's going to produce the Y list to your home screen, and the calculator will run a linreg on your data, on those 2 variables, to see the linear trend if it exists. Okay, so when you hit enter, again, when your data and your diagnostic is on, you'll get about 0.799.